We will get right back to our content, but I wanted to thank you for being such an amazing band director, that you're taking your time and listening to a band director podcast. There's many options out there, and I appreciate you very much taking in this content. I hope that you understand that your students are very lucky to have you as their band director, that you're continuing to grow, and that they are going to benefit from your improved skills as a band director. You can share this episode with any band director friends or other music education friends who can learn from this content, because good pedagogy is good pedagogy. And if you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com, and you'll be able to sign up on our Patreon platform to give at least $5 or $3 a month. And it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 198. I'm here with Joe Wright. Joe, how are you?
I'm great, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Elementary by choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a like a winding career, as many of us have had, and you've taught at all levels or many levels, and now you've settled on elementary.
I have.
Can you tell us kind of a little bit about that path and kind of what led you to
Sure.
elementary?
I mean, first of all, I don't know a lot of people who can claim this, but one of the things I think is kind of cool and unique about my career is I have literally taught every grade. I've been the primary music teacher for some kid at every grade from pre-kindergarten through graduate school in my career, about 10 years ago, I started teaching third grade recorder in Andover, and that completed the link. I had done them all. I taught pre-K through second grade in Chelsea classroom music when I was in grad school. And, and I taught grades 4 through 12 band, and I taught at Boston University. And when I hit that third grade recorder, that completed the chain. So I've done all of it, most of it band, of course, not the really young ones, but, so when I started off teaching, I, like a lot of people, just envisioned myself teaching high school band. I think that's kind of where I was, where I thought I wanted to head. My first job was 5 through 12. And all right, I'll teach 5 through 8 if I get to do the high school part too and everything. And I don't think I realized initially that when I got up in the morning, that part of it was just as exciting to me as high school. I mean, we're going to go off and we're going to do the marching band, and we're going to do competitions, and we'll do the jazz band. But at no point I probably had to looking backwards saying, I never went, oh, okay, let me get through the middle school part of the day. Then I get to do the high school. It was never that, when I went to grad school, I backed into a situation where I was a graduate assistant for the marching band at Boston University. And there was a abrupt change in personnel very shortly after that season started, and I was tagged to help hold it together until they figured out what they were going to do, which turned into help us finish out the year, which turned in, if you can give us a year so we can do a search, which turned into 9 years. And I loved it. And at the time I was in it, it looked like, okay, this is where I'm headed now. Now I'm a college band director. And I know that every time an attractive school job popped up, I'd at least have a look at it. And I looked deeper, and the further I got into teaching college and preparing future band directors, school band directors, I kept saying, man, I'm just not done doing that. It was never my intent to leave it when I did. I was just going to take some time, get better at it, and go back to it. And turns out that's exactly what I did. It just took 7 or 8 years.
One of the themes I've heard over tons of episodes here is like, people realize that good teachers aren't high school teachers, and bad teachers aren't elementary and middle school teachers. But there are some people who think like the better the students are, the more experienced they are, the better of a teacher you are.
Right.
No, that is not the case in any way. And everybody I talk to around the country agrees with that.
Yeah.
Like there's nobody, but we still have that in our mind, right? I bet you there's a ton of people who teach elementary band who are like, I'm a good teacher. Right.
Yeah.
And I really hope people in their district understand that.
Right.
That just because your students are less experienced, in some ways you need to have a bigger bag of tricks. Austin Custom Brass is a proud sponsor of today's podcast. They can be found online at austincustombrass.biz. The Austin Custom Brass shop is located in Kansas City, Missouri. They're frequent attendees at MEAs around the country, including a TMEA in Texas and Kansas and Missouri. They go to Midwest and Chicago and International Trumpet Guild. And give them a call today at 816 410-0826. If it's anything brass, they have it. Beginner to professional. This is a startup company from many years ago that's grown and grown and grown. Trent Austin has done a fantastic job with this. They're great people. They have many types of instruments from Adams to Rath trombones and Shires and Getson and Edwards and Schilke and Lotus and Courtois and many, many more. They have many new and pre-owned instruments. You can check them out online again at austincustombrass.biz. They also offer a great selection of high quality, budget conscious brass instruments for students and band programs, including being the exclusive dealer for Manchester Brass, great company. They also offer Brass Spire, Carroll Brass, John Packer, Y. Fort, and of course, our own wonderful line of instruments, a Austin Custom Brass Doublers line. Give them a call today at 816-410-0826 and find out why they can help you grow as a brass player. There are remarkable resources for all brass players, and they will do POs and work within your budget for your band program to get you what you need for your kids.
Exactly. I mean, it's not hard to get great musicians to sound good. Mm-hmm. It's a real challenge to get kids with no experience to get to a point where they're experiencing music on a level like that.
So since you've done all these grades, all these levels, can't imagine that. That's awesome. What are some of the similarities of like what is the same in every grade?
I say this all the time. Everybody loves music. I mean, it's the first thing that we use to try to soothe a crying infant besides food. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody loves music. Now, not everybody loves the same music. Not everybody loves the same involvement of music. But when you start off as a music teacher, when everyone shows up at your room in some way loving music, that's a leg up. And you know, even the third graders who have to show up, they're all going to be there. That's what they have from 10 to 10:45 that day. They all, you know, they're probably going to hum something to themselves during that day because they're happy, you know. And if you have, you know, I don't know of any other subject that universally everybody has a connection with like music. And so that's a real leg up. That's one thing we have in common. And as music teachers, we get to help them find a connection where they're creating it, where they're exploring it, where they're experiencing it, not just consuming it. And that's something that we have in common from your upperclassmen wind ensemble right down to, you know, ragtime, you know.
So a teacher who can teach at all those levels, the secret is probably the connection with the kids, right? Like the connection with the humans. They might be tiny humans and with a ton of emotions in these tiny little bodies,
right?
And they might be large humans who are bigger than us,
right?
But in the end, they are humans,
exactly. And music is something that we all share in common, that we can find that connection.
And I guess if you can relate to whatever that age is,
right,
and then you can assess what they know and where they're at,
right,
and you can meet them there and maybe push them a little bit more. Like you should be able to do that, right?
So 13 years into my career, at the end of my 9th year at Boston University, I'm like, I need to be a school band director again. I think that's what I want to do, especially when this opportunity came up to do so. And I took it. And that time it was high school plus help with middle school, 6th through 8th. And there were 2 elementary school band directors that did the middle schools. And I would go down with the time I had to help them out. Budget cuts necessitated the elimination of 4th and 5th grade, and one of those positions was eliminated and the other one was reallocated to something else. So I was the only band director in that town in 3 middle schools and the high school, and band started in 6th grade from that point on.
Wow.
And that was tough. That was hard. But now all of a sudden I am a middle school and high school band director again, like I was in my first job.
Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast with a roster of imaginative composers, including composers who have been featured on this podcast, such as Carol Britton Chambers, Laura Estes, and Tyler Arcari. Excelsior Music Publishing provides new music for concert band, jazz ensemble, solo and ensemble, as well as books and resources for all levels and occasions, including a large and festive selection of music for your fall, holiday, and Christmas concerts. Find your perfect next piece at excelsiamusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com.
And I'll tell you the same thing is like, I looked as forward to the middle school part of it as I did the high school, you know. Changes happened and things got better, and it was a overall gaining. And then into about my 12th year in this job, we were going to get staffing back, and we were going to get one band position back. And it was their hope that that would be enough to get it going in the 4th grade again. Part of me said, that's not enough. Another part of me said, grab this, because they want it to happen, and just make it happen and do the best you can with it. So we did. And that was the time at which my son, who's now 22 years old, entered 6th grade. And he's now going to have a busy life, sports and everything like that. And I just had this epiphany like overnight once, saying, what if the new person is the new high school band director, and I'll teach 4th through 8th. And I know everybody in town. I know all the principals. I know, I like them. I can work with them. If we need to be able, in order to be able to afford this new person, and we need to hire someone young, someone who isn't way down on the pay scale, that's going to be a really hard job for someone who's new to start an elementary band program. Whereas I think I could be successful in that. And we can get someone up to speed at high school a lot easier if they're young. And that's exactly what happened. And I was still on staff for the marching band, but I was no longer the director, which gave me the opportunity to go to cross country meets and everything for my son, and be a better father for a little while. And I think maybe I even saw that as temporary at the time. But that's the way it stayed for another 7 years or so. And I just found I wasn't unhappy, that I loved it. It was gratifying. It was musically gratifying. It was definitely, I found I really had a connection with that age of the student. My joke is that that's probably about where my development arrested. So they're really my people.
As a tuba player,
right? Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure which is the cause or the symptom, but yeah. But I loved it, and I loved the job, and I was a grade 4 through 8 band director, and I had 5 classes a week of 3rd grade recorders, and absolutely loved that.
Was the pressure just different teaching younger students versus teaching?
I remember my first job thinking, all right, I can take kids that have been playing for a while, and I can try to bring greatness out of them. What an awesome responsibility it is to get them started, where you're almost 100% responsible for their success, at least early on. And happily finding out that that's something I could do, that I was finding a path to it, and enjoyed it. And yes, that is, and also, for years I was making my own meal for the high school. I was making, these kids were going to be in my high school band. Now there's a little bit of, okay, I'm getting them ready for somebody else. Somebody else is going to take what I give them, and they're going to look at this work and see whether, and so I think there was that level of pressure.
One thing my wife says, have you ever met my wife?
I haven't.
Okay.
No.
One thing that she says, because she wanted to be a high school band director too.
Yeah.
The first job that was available that she was able to take was a middle school job. She was there 2 years, and then she moved to the Westbrook middle school job. So she's been middle school forever. Once she started, she said, I'll never leave.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with high school.
Right.
And the reason was because of how the students reacted when they learned something new.
Right.
The high school kids are like, yeah, cool, fine. Rarely do they get super excited about that. They get excited about other stuff.
Right.
But in middle school, when they learn how to count a rhythm, they're like, she said, the way they react, their faces light up, and they think it's the coolest thing in the world. She's like, that hooked me, and that's what made me want to continue to be a middle school teacher.
I'm right there with her. Yeah. No, it's exactly it.
I love it.
Yeah. But now there's even a little bit of a tectonic shift that for my career too, because right when COVID hit, I found an opportunity where I wasn't going to be driving between 8 schools over the course of a week. That I had this opportunity to move to this district.
8 schools?
8 schools. Yeah. With 3 middle schools and 5 elementaries. I was usually only in 2 a day, but sometimes 3. Right. It was tough, and the thing I keep reminding myself, it was better than before, and I always said it will get better later. Starting to think, yeah, that might be true, but I knew COVID wasn't going to speed that up any. And What I'd hoped would be the case turned out to be the case when I went to my district and I said, I'm moving on. I need to look at this new position. I'm not unhappy here, but I think this needs to be where I go next. And, ultimately they replaced me with 2 FTE. They say, all right, we're not going to find anybody as dumb as Joe to do what we're asking. We're going to have to actually get the right number of people for this. And to their credit, they did. They staffed it appropriately, and it's definitely better. And they have 2 wonderful teachers sharing that load, and they're absolutely moving in a different direction. So I might have done them a service. My new job started off as I was one of 3 band directors in one school, grades 5 through 8, and which was ridiculous and amazing and awesome. And the change that has been made is that that district built a brand new high school that then also included a wing for the 7th and 8th graders. So there's a middle school and high school on one campus in Belmont. One of the 3 of us went down to the new middle school, and the 2 of us are left to what is now a 4 through 6 building. And the 2 of us are doing just band in that school, 4 through 6.
So I kind of wanted to segue a little bit into, as a beginner teacher now, and as a tuba player,
right?
I think every band director would vote for having a ton of low brass in their band.
Sure.
I think everybody understands the pyramid of sound and
Right.
why we want more tubas than we want piccolos and all the things.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you think are important as we're like, let's just talk tuba at first. Do you start tuba players first off?
Case by case.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to it. It's a hard instrument to start on just because you're a little person.
Yep.
And there are some good products out there. They're the simple little like tripod with a little cradle that you put in front. And
the tuba stands.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not necessarily big on the whole big traction machines with 3 arms and a thing coming out. And I don't think you need that. And they're expensive and they don't even that good, in my opinion. But to make sure you can give the kid the best chance at success, physically by putting them in there. You get a kid that comes to you in 4th or 5th grade starting to say, I want to be a tuba player. Then if you can make that happen, do it. Because, anybody who comes with a passion like that, and if it turns out to be wrong, you can send them in the right direction. I full disclosure, I work in a community where there is a very good chance that the families involved can financially support a kid's interest in something like that. And not everybody has that. And I'm mindful of the challenges there. And I have, hopefully some advice for that too. But the bottom line is, if the kid really wants to be a tuba player, if they saw something on Sesame Street or they saw something on a parade and they've been wanting to be a tuba player since 3rd grade, that's not the time to quash it.
I know one of the things we do is we try to have a tuba player at home for each kid,
right?
A tuba at home, so they don't have to carry it back and forth. What are some characteristics? Say you were picking out from a group of students, what are you looking for in a kid? Is it all size, or is there anything else that you're looking for that you think they might be successful?
Try very hard not to let that be a governing factor. I have way too many stories about people who were the wrong size for the instrument that ended up having a wonderful life with it. And anything I can do to mitigate that is fine. Now, on the other hand, if I've got a kid who doesn't know what they want to play and they're, 5'7" in the 4th grade, and I might steer them to tuba if all things being equal. But, I've got this wonderful family in my town where I teach that they're all relatively diminutive. And the first one wanted to play tuba, and we got a tuba in her hands and she did beautifully with it. And her little brother wanted to be tuba because his sister was, and she's doing great. And now I have the 3rd one who's just finishing 5th grade, and they're all still playing and they're all playing great. And mom and dad were in the situation where they could figure out a way to get a couple of decent 3/4 size tubas in their house, and they all have their own mouthpiece, and we have a horn for them at school. And just out of a hatred and competitive nature at home, they're all doing great.
That's awesome. Beautiful.
Just want to be better than any of the other ones.
One of the things my wife does sometimes, if she has a band like in 6th grade where she's looking for another tuba player or 2, she'll hold auditions and she'll make it a very public thing. Any kid can sign up for it and she'll talk about how cool it is and how special it is to play the tuba. she'll do the same thing with bassoon and French horn and other things too. So
Yeah.
like there's this cool aspect to it.
Right.
Sometimes she'll do it and then she'll have 15 kids audition for the tuba.
It's
Right.
kind of like the whitewashing the fence thing. You make
Yep.
it look cool by
Yep.
making it look like something nobody
Yeah.
else can do. Yeah.
So, if you get to a point where you need more, the audition thing sometimes works. And
Yeah.
sometimes you get to a band where it's like, I don't know who's going to do this. Like, cause you
Right.
only have a small, certain number of kids in a certain band. And,
Right.
so as you're actually starting kids, so as a professional tuba player,
Right.
what are some things that people as elementary band directors should do for tuba players? Like, what should they like regarding tonguing and embouchure and hand
Sure.
position, all that?
Well, the other thing that's important to point out is that low brass euphonium tuba, as I'm sure you know, can be a saving grace for a struggling musician.
Yes.
For someone you can tell has got the desire and has a lot of what it takes, but just isn't cut.
You're terrible at the trumpet.
Right. Just
let's try something else.
Can't get above that G, which is exactly my situation in 5th grade.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into euphonium. The one factor that you absolutely have to lean on all the time, from the time they're beginning, probably until they really get it figured out years later, is it's all about air. And it takes logically, it takes a great volume of air, and it takes a lot of patience, because you don't necessarily have the same volume of air at 5th grade that you're going to have in 8th grade. And it's okay to breathe, breathe in between half notes until you don't have to anymore, until you get more efficient with this, or until you get bigger. It's okay to do that. And to make sure you have patience with them, and more importantly, make sure that they have patience with themselves.
So as you're telling your band, as if you're teaching young students and you're saying, let's do 8 beat breaths,
right?
Let's phrase for 4 measures,
right?
I always say, except for the tubas.
Yeah.
You breathe as often as you need to make a good sound.
Yeah. Just do your best. Right.
Yeah.
And right. Just keep making good sound. If you got to take a breath, frankly, I say that to everybody.
Yep.
I mean, there's going to be someone in the bottom of the trumpet section who needs to hear that too, and probably half the flutes. But yes, if you don't have to laser focus it on the poor tuba player, great. But yes, no, that's always what I say. Do your best with 8. If you don't have it, grab a breath. All right, air's free.
I have a Jeff Priest line in my head right now that I have to share. So in his band, he teaches at Old Town, and the story he always said was he needed 7 tubas in the band. We can't do anything without 7 tubas. The reason is because when they went to the football games, they had to have 7 sousaphones to spell out OLDTOWN. So we can't do anything. So he would start the beginning of the year. Now, whether this is true or not, knowing Jeff, who knows? But he would always say, we're not going to play until we have our 7th tuba. So finally, after, a flute player's like, fine, I'll play, whatever. So, and he always said, I always had the class before lunch. And I always let my tuba players go 2 minutes before everybody else. So they would get to the front of the line in the cafeteria.
And that's all the incentive they needed.
So he's like, I've never had a problem with low brass players because they want to eat first.
He told the story here, didn't he? It's all ringing a bell now. Yeah. That's
I love
awesome.
that.
That's awesome.
I love that. Any specific mouthpieces for beginners?
So, I mean, like every other instrument, every company has their different standards. But when you go with the Vincent Bach mouthpiece, it varies from kid to kid. The Vincent Bach has like a 24 or 22, which is a smaller mouthpiece, and a little easier it's got a little more resistance so that you can get a buzz. However, the 18, which is kind of the standard one, and it's where you want all your kids on, at least by the time they get out of middle school, is big enough so that you have more control of that second partial, the low B flat.
Okay. But if they start on something smaller that allows them, it's like starting on a 7C for trumpet.
Yeah. Well, when you hand a tuba to a struggling trumpet player and you give them the mouthpiece and you put it on there, the first buzz is usually at least a major third higher than they will ever play again until high school. They did, because they're used to doing that and everything like that. And of course, once they learn how to do it properly, they can't possibly replicate that crazy high note they got the first time they did it. But but we're not giving kids tubas because we want to be able to play high. So but there's, that the throat size on the 22 or 24 is a little easier to get a buzz on. But if all you've got is 18s and that's what they're going to get to eventually, and you can be successful with those.
Is there a correlation with Yamaha?
Yeah. And
Probably
I've
not off the top of your head.
learned and relearned. It's like 48, I think is,
Okay.
but that's
I've seen
something
that
we
number
should
a bunch.
double
That's
check.
probably right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's that you buy a tuba, it's going to be a flip of the coin whether it comes with a 24 or an 18, but the Yamaha will always come with that 18 size corresponding.
So the next question I had was about, I've heard this a couple times, when you're tonguing on the tuba. Like as a trumpet player, I'm used to playing the trumpet.
Yeah.
Tuba, I need to work.
Yeah.
Right. Like I couldn't sit down and function on tuba right now.
Right.
I could on euphonium, I could on trombone, I can't on trumpet, I can't on horn. Tuba is a completely different thing.
Sure.
Do when you're tonguing.
Yeah.
I've heard the tho sometimes too, but is like there's the concept to get the tongue forward and lighter.
Yep.
Okay.
Right. And yeah, the D thing, using a D versus a T, frankly, I do that with all my brass players. And but yes, I do. I don't ever preach the TH, but I know for some people when that kind of happens organically and it'll work. Linguistically, the difference between a D and T, there's almost no tongue difference. It's the voice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. When you voice a T, you're not using your voice until after you release the air. E. Whereas a D, you're engaging the voice first. D. That metaphor helps my brass players envision a steady air supply. D, 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 the voice doesn't stop, or t, 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 the voice stops to set up the next one, which I know it's not the same thing. We're not engaging the voice, but it's a good metaphor for the air support. Yep. And I say that because air support, air flow is what makes the successful articulation.
You need vibration.
Yeah.
So
right.
I've even heard a lot of teachers recently on the podcast talk about they use the word vibrating with their band rather than buzzing.
Yeah.
Like we're just going to vibrate this or whatever. I thought that was interesting.
That's interesting too.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a different terminology, but it's like the point of this is where the sound is coming from. I assume as a tuba player, you would advocate for music for young band that has good low brass parts.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, where they get the melody and they don't just play whole notes or quarter notes.
Yes. Frankly, sometimes it's nice when it is almost a timpani part if you're trying to get them up to speed. Yeah, it's all 1 and 5. And I mean, we've all heard the joke about that kid who goes to his first tuba lesson. I don't know if you've ever.
I haven't heard this. No.
Kid goes to his first tuba lesson. He's there for 45 minutes. He comes home. His mom says, "How'd it go?" "It's good. I learned B flat." "All right, let's hear it." "Whoa, whoa, whoa." "Great, great." "All right." And the second tuba lesson next week. "What'd you learn today?" "It was 45 minutes." "I learned F." "Boop, boop, boop." "Oh, yeah, that's good, good." So he goes to his next tuba lesson. He's gone for 3.5 hours. Comes back. "Where you been?" "Oh, I had my first gig."
It's a good one.
Yeah. But yes, no. And, it's funny because I was just at that conference in Keene where Randall Standridge makes it a very big part of his priority to have interesting melodic parts for all, including low brass, and young composers are taking that into consideration very much and not treating them like, the doorman of the band. And
if anybody's hearing this for the first time, that's odd because you haven't listened to this podcast. I'll say that because it's a lot of people have said that on this podcast.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah. Treating them like they're not second-class citizens musically.
Right.
So one of the things we want to talk about today too is like how you reach different learning styles that you mentioned, including varying your teaching for all the different learning styles that might be in your band.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And learning styles and, everything styles, kids are all different from each other. And, over the last 7 or 8 years in both my previous and my current district, we've been focusing on universal design for learning, coming up with learning environments that hit all of as many different learning styles as we can. And when you are, it's first of all, one of the things that's tough is, it's not having kids that learn differently from each other, having kids that have behavioral issues in your group. Those aren't obstacles of your teaching. That's your job, and I think accepting that and embracing that is a big part of your success with that, and finding the ways in which each of your kids learn. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about kids necessarily who struggle to learn traditionally or whatever. You're talking about the kids who for whom it comes very quickly, and how can we make this environment something that is gratifying and meaningful for them while not leaving everyone else in the dust.
Can you give me what specific examples might come to mind when you talk about this?
All right. So am I doing work, when I'm choosing my literature, is this going to keep everybody engaged? Both the people who could do more and the people who might struggle with this.
Yeah.
And what can I do about that? How can one student play a role in bringing another one along? What accommodations can I make with this music? I know that there's a lot of ones that are designing like flex arrangements and that sort of thing that help that. But on the other hand, you don't want every kid to think here's your easy version of what everyone else is doing, a harder version of. And, but putting everybody in a situation where they're succeeding and giving your stronger musicians leadership opportunities in which they can be a part of.
So programming is huge, right? I mean, it's almost like you're trying to find a piece. Every piece you play, you're trying to make it like Terry White arranged it for your band. Like you're trying to make it fit as well as possible. And that's really hard to do.
It is.
So even at the end of last year, I had a student moving from trumpet to tuba, like in the spring, which is okay. But so he wanted to try to play a piece.
Yeah.
So the piece we were working on at that time for the concert that was going to work the best was Raiders March, arranged by Paul Lavender. It's a great flex band, grade 2. They sounded awesome on it.
Yeah.
Grade 2.5 maybe. The tuba part is all short quarter notes.
Right.
B flats and Fs. Well, for a brand new kid who could play low B flat, which was great.
Yeah.
Like he needed whole notes.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't really going to fit. So what we did to alter that part was, just the fact of holding the tuba and contributing something was what he wanted.
Yeah.
That's what he was moving to. That was better than trying to hang on trumpet on another piece.
Sure.
So literally we circled the first note of every measure and said, just try to play. And if it's long, like it's a big band, nobody's going to hear it as a half note versus a quarter note, one tuba player.
Right.
And so that's what he did.
Yep.
We just basically played the first note, and guess what? Within a week, he was playing beats 1 and beat 3.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
so we were able to tailor it to him at that moment.
And not only that, but you've got this really cool inflection from the section as a result of, musically, it actually probably improved.
And Dean Neal, who's a great teacher, he said on one of the episodes, some bass is better than no bass. Right. We were talking about like playing whole notes instead of a walking bass line in jazz band.
Sure.
Like same thing on tuba. Some tuba is better than no tuba.
Right. But always, always, always make sure that the kid knows that the word, if, you're not doing this the way it's written yet. That's always got to be there saying, and I'll be as patient with you as you need. You just got to do the same with yourself.
Any more thoughts on different learning styles? Other maybe specific things that you do on a regular basis?
First of all, I know there's a lot of, kids who have sensory issues. I have to be 100% respectful of that and put them in the best position. And if that means having some kid in the front row in a section in which they don't play in, there are worse things than that. If you had the saxophone player is not going to make it right in front of the timpani. All right. You know what? And if we move all of the saxes, we do. If we don't, we don't, but just accommodating those kinds of things and making everybody who has some sort of a difference with somebody else learning still feel like they're home there, and that they're valued and that they're there and that we're working with them,
One of the things that I think is important, at least at the high school level, this is different at the middle school level, because it still could be happening some. At the elementary level, I don't know how this happens, but One of the things I rely on is the different types of ensembles. Like some kids are wind band kids, like they love wind band and that's their thing.
Yeah.
Some kids are drumline kids or marching band kids. Like they may not be great at their instrument, but the minute you have them march, wow, are they spectacular. And
Yeah.
then they can cover the part really well, but they're exemplary marchers. Or maybe they struggle with rhythm, but when they're improvising, they kill it.
Yeah.
Right. Or when they're reading rhythm and then
Yeah.
so kids like it's very rare that kids are good at all of it,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
But I find at least in any school program, if you can have as many multiple things as possible, then there's more things for your kids to latch onto. So for example, there might be if your sixth grade is marching in a parade as part of a middle school, this kid might be not a great trumpet player, but then you get out to practice marching and you notice every time the doctor beat hits or whatever you're using to keep time, the kid's right in time.
Yeah.
Maybe they're an athlete and they can march really well, but they haven't figured out the trumpet part of it yet.
Right.
Well, there's another success that kid can have, even if it's not a quote unquote marching band, like a field marching band.
Right.
That's still a different deal.
Right. And you know what happens to kids when they have a measured success in something? It begets the next one.
Imagine you have a kid back there in the percussion section who always wants to play.
Right.
Like they can play, but you need to hold them down a peg because, like, no, you need to be part of a team. You can't always play. You have to. You're not just playing snare drum all the time. But if you do a good job, maybe you play drum set.
Yeah.
In the jazz band, and then you can play all the time because you're playing drums.
Yeah. I have a student, and I love telling the story. I have a former student. He's now in his early 30s. On the autism spectrum. Nonverbal isn't really a good way to describe it, but he doesn't really communicate with language. When he speaks, he's oftentimes quoting something from popular culture that is experiencing the emotion he's experiencing, like he'll quote a Disney movie or something like that, that is having a similar experience. And first met him when he was in 8th grade. And his parents, two people I greatly admire, still do, really encouraged his participation in the Andover High School marching band. And I remember thinking, oh man, is this going to be a lot of work? And it was a couple of things I learned about him fairly early is it doesn't look like he hears and understands what we're saying, but he absolutely does. Number 2, once he's got it, you can set your watch to it. And number 3, good luck overestimating this kid, because I never was able to. Anything I asked him, I'll try this, he would figure out a way to do. And by the time he was, I think he marched in the band for 7 or 8 years. He was in high school for longer than most kids are. And he was out with a bass drum on the bass drum line, and he was hitting his spots and he's hitting his licks. And he wasn't the first to it, but he was, once he had it, everyone was using him as a guide, and and he and I still every year go watch the Andover High School marching band at a football game. And then we go out to the 99 after, and the dude absolutely knows how to order a beer. It's awesome.
Yeah. And it's pretty funny. Sometimes the kids who can't in middle school
Yeah.
can later.
Yeah.
Too. Every kid is different, but like we have a kid who's now getting his doctoral degree in percussion composition, and he's this great writer and player and all this. And like he couldn't play the kabasa in middle school. He was on the spectrum as well. And like for some reason he couldn't like work that. But then within 2 years, he was just like ridiculous. And because he practiced 9 hours a day.
Right.
It's like one of those, you just don't want to write off kids as they're young.
And it's not, if you're looking for it and if you're searching it out, it's not too hard to find that passion. It's not too hard to find that they really want this.
Yeah.
And that's, I at least have to go into every situation saying, if I've got that, then we can do this.
My wife will say sometimes, this kid can't get out of his own way right now in 7th grade, but give him a couple of years, he's going to be pretty special.
Right.
Yeah. Recognizing that I think is good.
I've never been sorry that I had that philosophy about any kid.
Yeah. What are some pieces or composers at the young band, like the beginning band level that you
Yeah.
your go-tos?
Well, I mentioned Randall Standridge and I'm so glad I had the opportunity to work with him this week because, he's got definitely a very vivid social media presence and he
Mhm.
knows how to manipulate that and everything. I have to admire him on a certain level of that, but he really is authentic and he has got the right intentions and he's good enough at it to be commercially successful at it. And my kids love playing his stuff.
Yep.
And he's done a nice job of bringing them along on 6/8. He's done a nice job at making them feel like they're an important part of every composition. I like them. Big fan of Jody Blackwell.
Mhm.
Jody had a piece, which maybe some of you are familiar with.
Jody Blackshaw.
Shaw, thank you. Sorry.
Blackshaw. Okay.
Yeah, Blackshaw, thanks. Called 13 Moons. And it is this really sort of kit that you use to the kids compose their own piece. There are little, it's kind of like the old Lego sets where you had all the pieces, but there were only some suggestions of how you put them together rather than one way to do
Anybody
it.
who's watching can see a big Lego sets back there. Yeah.
That's my house looks like too. Still, my son's 22 and we still build Legos. But this is one of those things that you can put it together in any different way. And we see our 6th grade band in 2 different sections. And for this one piece, we needed to do them in 2 different bands because of this. And the best part of this was at the concert when half of the band did their version and then the other half did their version. The audience saw what both of these tools, what the result was from 2 different sources.
That's awesome.
Carol Britton Chambers is
Mhm.
another one we've really we've done a lot of and really find that they bring a lot of joy and greatness out of our kids. Yeah.
One thing that's kind of on my mind as we close is I'll just say this, and it's probably not an exclusive comment, but I've never met a dumb piano player. Right? So when we're thinking, I know that seems kind of random, but for people who have young kids or are maybe going to have kids or whatever,
right?
One of the things I always thought of my kids is like they're gonna study piano with hopefully a good teacher.
Yeah.
And not that they need to become a professional piano player, but have you ever had a band kid who was like they played piano from the time they were 5 and they were bad at band?
Right.
So they've done these neurological studies about what it is when you're playing the piano, reading or not reading or both,
right?
And what the 2 sides of the brain are doing, and it's just on fire.
Yeah.
And so if there's one thing I always tell parents, if they want their kids to be a good musician, just start piano.
Yeah.
I've always heard that like before 5th grade is kind of useless. I mean, sorry, before 5 years old is kind of is what I meant. Because they're kind of too early. I suppose there's some leeway in that, but I want to make that plug. We're talking about young kids, like a kid who can play piano, especially before they realize things are hard. Like my son, I'm not bragging about him, but the teacher we had when he first started was all about these 5-finger positions, right? Like 1 through 5 and all the keys. So within like 3 months, he knew all 12 positions. So he could play whatever tune they were working on in any key just by asking.
Yeah.
So to this day, he can play Thriller, but you can change keys and it's like not a problem.
That's cool.
So yeah.
I will 100% agree with that. And my first instrument was piano and I studied it steadily through 12th grade.
Yep.
And I know what a tremendous value that was. And frankly, I'd had a year or 2 of piano before I had my unfortunate non-starter with trumpet. And I'm not sure that I would have persevered had I not known, hey, listen, if I can do piano, I can do something in band.
Right.
So I think that's probably, were you a pianist before you?
No, but this was big. We never got piano lessons. I actually got one in grad school from Arlene Keyes, one of the best piano players ever. But I was like, you're teaching me? Like, can I get somebody like you're so much better than I'm? She's like, no, I want to teach you. I was like, okay, it was awesome. But no, my mom had this old upright piano in our house. Never got tuned. It was super out of tune. 3 or 4 keys didn't work. It was one of those pianos, but we always had it available to go to. And I swear that was a big part of my musical development is I just, every week, my entire childhood, I was sitting and doing something.
Yeah.
Like didn't have video games, but I could go play that.
Right. And I had a similar relationship with piano, even though I did have lessons. My mother started me off with piano and she got me going with the 5 fingers on each hand and showed me how the grand staff worked and everything like that. And I had about a year of that, which was probably 3rd grade before I started taking lessons. And I had already figured out how to figure a bunch of stuff by ear and
Mhm.
had developed all kinds of wonderful bad habits before I got in front of a real teacher for whom it was a weekly battle of her trying to fix all the stuff that,
Yeah.
that I was doing wrong. And, she was great. She was my first real taste of high expectations and rigor. I had a lot of my teachers, I was getting a lot of, oh man, it's so great to have you in band and everything like that. And I wasn't getting a lot of, um, you a lot of feedback, a lot of constructive feedback, except from my piano teacher.
Yeah.
And at times I was like, man, I'm done with this nonsense. But one of the reasons I stuck with it is because her husband was the local news anchor.
Hmm.
And it was just so cool seeing, like, my lesson was at 6:30 on Thursday afternoons. And it's like, so I get there 5 minutes early and a little black and white TV, and I would have him on there finishing up the news. And then I get up and I do my lesson, and 7 o'clock comes and I'm putting my stuff in my bag and he's coming up the walk, and I just saw him and I thought that was the coolest thing. And
That's
so,
awesome.
so I stuck with it.
For anybody with young kids out there thinking about it in the future, there is an amazing app called Simply Piano that you don't even need a teacher. I mean, I'm not saying it replaces the teacher, but an iPad and a piano, and this app can like teach kids from super young and even adults too. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I can't argue that the piano background is an absolutely huge turbo boost for a young band career.
Well, Joe, thanks for coming. I appreciate
My
this.
pleasure. This has been a treat.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.